I didn't lose my temper when she kissed him on stage. I didn't yank the mic out of her hand, or shout, or flip a table like some drunken fool who didn't see it coming. No, I stood there, center aisle, tuxedo pressed, tie straight, watching the woman I spent 14 years building professionally and personally hand the award with my name on it to the boy she was sleeping with. Fresh vision, she said, like I was some obsolete piece of software. The applause was awkward, scattered. Most in the room weren't sure what just happened. A few guests looked toward me, as if waiting for the punchline, or maybe a protest. But I didn't give them the satisfaction. I just walked out, calmly, while her phone buzzed in her purse. She didn't even glance at it. Funny how quiet a betrayal is when it finally happens out loud. No thunder, no spotlight. Just the weight of 1,000 small slides suddenly clicking into place. The emails she'd accidentally leave open. The way she'd say we in meetings, but I to the press. The junior execs she started bringing to dinners. And Oliver, always Oliver, lurking at the edges of events, asking naive questions like, "Dean, do you ever worry you're too old school?" I should have slapped him with a spreadsheet. Instead, I stayed silent. I'd gotten used to playing the part she cast for me. The wise elder, the fallback, the advisor. Not the man who actually wrote the policies she quoted in interviews. Not the one who covered her screw-ups in budget meetings. I became the scaffolding so she could pose like architecture. But that night, as I walked out of the gala, something else clicked. Not rage. Not sadness. Clarity. I reached into my coat pocket and felt the small brass key I always kept there. It wasn't to the house. It wasn't to my office. It was to a drawer in a bank 2 blocks away. A drawer labeled C12. If you've made it this far, and stories like this strike a nerve, do me a favor. Over 90% of you listen but don't subscribe. But if you hit that subscribe button, it tells the team that their work means something. That quiet stories like this matter. It keeps us going. Anyway, back to Clara. She didn't check her phone that night. She was too busy posing for photos with Oliver, his hand on the small of her back, her champagne flute raised like a torch. But the person calling her wasn't a gossip columnist or jealous intern. It was Susan, Clara's mentor. A woman who once told me, Clara could rule a boardroom or burn it down. Depends who hands her the matches. And Susan had just watched her burn everything. The second I stepped into the street, my own phone buzzed. A private number. I answered. "Dean." Susan's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "Where are you?" "Out," I said. I tried calling her. "She's not answering." "She's busy," I said. "Probably celebrating." There was a long pause. Then, did she know? I exhaled, looking up at the city skyline, the lights from the gala flickering behind me like some twisted stage show. "No," I said finally. "She thinks tonight was her idea." Another pause. Then, "They'll want to talk. The board." "I know," I said. I didn't wait for a response. I ended the call and kept walking. Past the valet who looked unsure whether to approach me. Past the fountain she insisted the venue include for aesthetic value. Past all the guests still inside pretending they hadn't just witnessed a career kamikaze. It wasn't the betrayal that hit me hardest. It was the laughter. The way the room laughed when she kissed him, like it was clever. Like I was the joke. As if all the nights I stayed late to rewrite her presentations, all the times I took heat from auditors while she ran for cover, meant nothing. But I planned for this. Not this exact scene, but something like it. You don't spend your life building empires for someone else without also learning where the cracks are. And Clara? She built hers on credit. And I just called in the debt. Clara told her assistant that morning, with a laugh, "Dean's probably licking his wounds somewhere dramatic. He does this. He sulks." She rolled her eyes for effect, sipped her espresso, and moved the team's morning stand-up forward by 15 minutes. She was wearing white. Always white, after a win. But Dean wasn't sulking. He wasn't answering her calls either, not out of spite, but because he knew exactly what kind of cleanup usually followed Clara's little power statements. And this time, the mess wasn't his to manage. He was 2 hours north, alone, at a retreat he used to recommend to overstressed colleagues. The kind of place where the trees seemed to listen and the cell service politely declined. No assistants. No notifications. Just him, a fireplace, and a steel briefcase he hadn't opened since last summer. He placed the case on the table, clicked open both latches, and paused a moment before lifting the lid. Inside, there wasn't much. A fountain pen, a worn notebook, a USB drive labeled RCM DocsAuth, and one envelope, cream-colored, embossed. Contingency plan, C12. He slid it out. Thick paper. Heavy. Inside, 12 individually addressed letters, already stamped. Each marked with a board member's name. Real names. Not assistants or deputies, principals. Susan was one of them, of course. So was Linford Gallo, whose smile could bankrupt startups. And Danny Rowe, the kind of CEO who never returned calls unless they came with a spreadsheet or subpoena. 12 people who, together, could dismantle Clara's entire web, if they had reason. Dean had spent the past year giving them one. It wasn't vindictive. It was surgical. Each letter contained a curated dossier. Not gossip. Not assumptions. Hard evidence. 3 forged signatures. 2-side contracts that siphoned bonus funds to Clara's discretionary budget. Her mentorship of Oliver, which included a housing subsidy buried under team-building expenses. And, crucially, a project in Jakarta she'd greenlit using internal funds without procurement sign-off, a move that breached compliance protocols in 4 separate ways. Dean hadn't fished for dirt. He'd just stopped covering it and started recording it. The beauty of it all, he hadn't added a single accusation. Just the receipts. Just the untouched truth. No embellishment. No narrative. Let Clara explain it all to 12 very sober people who knew how much a scandal could cost in shares and silence clauses. He reread one of the letters, then sealed it again. When he was done, he packed the briefcase, stepped outside, and handed it to the concierge with one instruction. Same courier as last time. 12 destinations. Overnight. The concierge didn't flinch. Understood, Mr. Whitaker. Back in the cabin, Dean poured himself coffee. No sugar this time. The silence was unfamiliar at first. No meetings. No back-to-back Zooms. No being summoned to put out a fire. He watched a bird land on the windowsill, tilting its head toward him like it had questions. He raised his mug in response. Back at HQ, Clara was already starting to feel the tremors. A missed email. An invite she wasn't copied on. HR rescheduling her one-on-one. She brushed it off. By noon, she'd sent Oliver a voice memo. Lunch. Victory lap. No reply. She tried calling Dean again, more out of routine than concern. Straight to voicemail. And then, finally, she remembered the buzzing phone from the gala. She hadn't checked it. It had felt beneath her in the moment. She did now. 5 missed calls. All from Susan. Clara stared at the screen. Then at the door. Then at her own reflection in the darkened glass of the office window, smiling in white, like nothing could touch her. But something already had, and it had been waiting, quietly, for a year. For years ago, Dean walked into his own kitchen to the sound of Clara laughing. Not the kind of laugh she gave him, the warm, rehearsed chuckle that sounded like a TED Talk clip, but the sharp, nasal cackle she reserved for people she didn't need to perform for. It came from her phone, sitting face down on the island, speaker still on. She had stepped out to grab her laptop. He wasn't trying to eavesdrop. He just froze when he heard the voice on the other end. Oliver. I don't know. Oliver was saying. What if this Jakarta thing goes sideways? We're pretty exposed on the approval side. Clara didn't hesitate. Let Dean take the fall. He's used to cleaning up my messes. There was a pause. Oliver chuckled, nervous. She continued, more casually now, like it was obvious. He likes being the fixer. Gives him purpose. Dean stood still. Not angry. Not surprised. Just still. The kitchen light flickered overhead. One of those fluorescent bulbs they never bothered replacing. Clara always said it made the granite look dramatic. Dean always thought it just made everything seem slightly off. He left without a word. Didn't confront her. Didn't ask who Oliver was to her. Not yet. Instead, he walked down to his home office, turned on the old HP printer that coughed before it started, and opened his shared drive folder. Co-signatures 2013, present. He printed them all. Every contract, memo, and board authorization that had both their names on it. 67 documents. He went page by page. With a red pen. Marked every single one she altered after his signature. Tweaks in phrasing, removed clauses, line items that didn't match the original draft. He highlighted them. Then cross-referenced each version against the timestamps from the internal server logs. Downloaded those too. Made physical backups. Uploaded them to 2 external drives. One of which he mailed to a friend in Montreal, a retired CFO with nothing but time and a deep loathing for corner cutters. He didn't sleep that night. Not because he was heartbroken. Because he finally understood her. Clara hadn't changed. She'd evolved. When they met, she was sharp, ambitious, wildly persuasive. But there was always a current beneath it. A streak of calculation. Of testing boundaries. He thought marriage would ground her. That his reputation would temper her risk-taking. Instead, it emboldened her. He became the shield. The fallback. The firewall she could send any bad decision through, knowing he'd emerge charred but intact. The next morning, Clara made coffee and kissed him on the cheek like nothing happened. He kissed her back, poured cream into his mug. She said, "You're quiet today." He shrugged, "Just thinking about Jakarta." She raised an eyebrow. "Still hung up on that." "It'll be fine. I'll loop you in on the revisions later." "Looking forward to it," he said. Later that week, she presented a glowing project timeline at the board meeting. Dean sat 2 seats away, nodding, answering the technical questions while Clara fielded the praise. She wore her hair up that day, power look, gold hoops, confidence like cologne. And Dean wore the same calm expression he always did. He smiled. He clapped. He even made a joke about pacing ourselves. But in his briefcase was a new folder. Label, Redline Edits, C. It stayed with him. Boardroom to airport. Home to hotel. He never left it in drawers. Never trusted cloud storage. It was his quiet rebellion. Not because he planned revenge, but because, in Clara's world, people only mattered when they were useful. And he had just decided, if he ever became disposable, she discovered just how useful he had been. Susan had always been the one person Clara treated like an equal, at least in public. Behind closed doors, it was more complicated. Clara admired her, sure, but admiration curdled quickly when paired with ambition, especially when you started thinking you deserved the mentor's seat at the table. Susan Carvale wasn't just a board member. She was the board, one of the founding partners. Built the firm out of a garage during the dot-com burst while others were still pitching ideas on napkins. Her name carried weight. And when she tapped Clara for mentorship all those years ago, it wasn't out of charity. It was calculation. Clara was brilliant, yes, but also dangerous. Susan believed in keeping fire close, where she could see it. For a while, it worked. Clara rose fast, but carefully. Never too loud. Never too bold. Just enough to be undeniable. Susan taught her the art of influence without spectacle, of slipping power into the room without announcing it. Then Oliver appeared. Susan noticed the change immediately. First, Clara stopped running things by her. Then came the invites to speaking panels where Susan's name was conspicuously absent. 1 month Clara was thanking her publicly for decades of mentorship, and the next she was rewriting firm history to make herself sound like a lone prodigy. The final straw came during a quarterly offsite. Clara showed up with Oliver in tow, introducing him not as our new analyst, but as the next wave. He wore a designer suit, and that smugness common among people who haven't yet made real mistakes. Clara laughed too loudly at his jokes, touched his shoulder when she didn't need to. Later that night, Susan pulled her aside. "You want to sleep with him? Fine. Keep it quiet. You want to mentor him? Fine. Do it properly. But don't drag him through the front door like he's your co-founder. The board watches everything. Don't turn this into a spectacle." Clara smiled, glass in hand. "Susan, this isn't 1999. No one cares who's dating who anymore." "You're wrong," Susan said, dead serious. "The market doesn't punish relationships. It punishes sloppy ones." Clara rolled her eyes. "You sound like my father." Susan didn't answer. She just turned and walked away, heels echoing sharply on the marble floor. The night of the gala, Susan watched the train wreck unfold from her table near the front. Her name was printed in gold foil on the seating card. Next to it, a tiny crystal box, a token of appreciation from the organizing committee. Inside was a pin in the shape of a laurel wreath. It was supposed to symbolize legacy. She watched as Clara took the stage, the award card in hand. Saw Dean rise slowly from his chair, believing, naively, faithfully, that she would say his name. And then she didn't. Susan didn't clap. She didn't laugh when Clara kissed Oliver on the cheek. She just picked up her phone and called her. Straight to voicemail. She tried again. Still nothing. Across the room, Dean walked out. No expression. No words. Just vanished. Susan got up and followed. But by the time she reached the lobby, he was gone. She stood in the cold for a minute, arms wrapped tight across her chest. Then pulled up his number and dialed. He answered. "Susan," he said, without emotion. "I want to fix this. Before the board meets," she said. The words came fast, like they'd been waiting all evening to escape. Dean didn't say anything at first. She waited. He finally said one word. "Too late," and hung up. Not abruptly, not cruelly, just finally. Susan stared at the phone in her hand. For the first time in years, she felt what it was like to be behind the curve. Clara had scorched the ground faster than Susan had predicted. And now, even Susan couldn't put out the fire. The first thing Clara noticed was the silence. Not the quiet kind, the staged kind. The kind that happens when people see you coming and suddenly pretend to be busy. Her assistant, Tanya, didn't offer coffee. Didn't say good morning. Just nodded. Then glanced away like she didn't want to be involved in something she'd already seen too much of. Clara walked into her office and saw Dean's desk. Clean. Empty. Too empty. No legal pads. No pens scattered in neat chaos. No sticky notes marked with his looping script. Even the framed photo of their first acquisition party, the one he kept out of sentimental guilt, was gone. In its place, one item. A matte black binder. Centered. Deliberate. Label printed in bold white block letters. Transition notes. She didn't touch it at first. She just stared. Then she picked it up, sat down in his chair, not hers, his, and opened it. First page, a table of contents. Section 1, Contract Deviations. Section 2, Unapproved Budget Transfers. Section 3, Conflict of Interest, Oliver K. Section 4, Signature Discrepancies, Red Flagged. Section 5, External Communications, Unvetted Releases. She blinked. Turned the page. Each section was color-coded, cross-referenced, and tabbed. Internal emails printed and time-stamped. Meeting notes. Copies of her edits in pen. Her pen, scanned and highlighted. Audit trail screenshots. Legal disclaimers she'd removed. One document was marked with a single red tag at the top. Forwarded, Linford Gallo, March 10th, 8:13 a.m. Below it, another. Forwarded, Susan Carvale, March 10th, 8:14 a.m. Her stomach turned. Her hands, for the first time in years, trembled. It wasn't just a record. It was a map. A prosecution guide. Built with precision. Written in her own handwriting, her own words, her own recklessness. Catalogued like artifacts at a crime scene. She flipped furiously. There, under Section 3, was an invoice she thought no one had ever seen. Oliver's temporary relocation stipend, buried under research development. Dean had flagged it, dated it, matched it to an internal expense report. The total, $42,000. Just enough to keep Oliver close. She slammed the binder shut, marched out of the office. Tanya, she snapped. Her assistant looked up, startled. Who touched Dean's desk? No one touched it, Tanya said cautiously. He came in last night. Cleared it himself. Said you'd know why. Clara's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Then Tanya added, oh, and legal was here this morning. Clara froze. Who from legal? General counsel. Came in early. Said he was following up on forwarded items. Asked if we had hard copies of anything Dean mentioned in the binder. I didn't know what he meant. Clara turned without responding. Shut her office door harder than she meant to. Her first instinct was to call Dean. Ask what the hell he thought he was doing. But the call wouldn't go through. Blocked. She tried Susan. Voicemail. She reached for her calendar to check her afternoon schedule. Needed to find someone, anyone, to anchor herself to. But a new email popped up. From HR Department. Subject. Meeting canceled. Performance and compensation review. Body. This meeting has been postponed pending clarification of internal matters. We will reschedule once all documents have been reviewed. Thank you for your understanding. That's when it happened. Panic. Not in a scream. Not in some grand breakdown. Just a single breath, cut short. Her reflection in the glass of the office wall looked wrong. Pale. Angled. Slightly off-center. She straightened her blouse. Adjusted her collar. Blinked rapidly. Then tried to laugh. They're overreacting, she whispered to herself. But her voice sounded small in the room. Even the lights felt dimmer. And the binder, that damn binder, sat there on Dean's desk, quiet and still, like it had been waiting to be found. She stared at it, and for the first time, realized. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a reckoning, and it had already started. Clara didn't even wait for her driver. She grabbed her coat, shoved the binder into her bag like she could bury it by force, and stormed out of the building. 15 minutes later, heels clicking like gunfire down the polished marble corridor of the executive floor, she reached Susan's office, only to find the door shut and locked. No assistant at the desk. No soft piano music from inside. Just silence, and a brushed steel plaque that felt suddenly colder. S. Carvale, senior partner, founding board member. She tried the handle anyway. Nothing. Then knocked. Sharp. Twice. Nothing. She knocked again, harder. Susan? It's Clara. Open the door. Still nothing. She took a breath, tried to calm the racing pulse behind her temples, and pulled out her phone. Texted. Hey. Urgent. Need to speak. Not a drill. Delivered. Not read. Then she tried email. Message bounced. Delivery failed. User no longer at this address. What? Confused, she opened her access badge folder, swiped her executive credentials against the glass-paneled elevator that led to the top floor. Red light. Access denied. She tried again. Slower. Still denied. The elevator didn't even blink. She pressed the call button for the operator. No answer. Finally, one of the junior staffers from compliance came by and tried not to look surprised when he saw her standing there. Need a hand? He asked politely. No, she snapped, then smiled too late. Just a glitch. She turned and walked away like it was all under control. In the hallway, her phone buzzed. Calendar notification. Special board session, 3 p.m., confidential. Location, executive conference room A. She scanned the invite. No Clara. She checked the sender. Anonymous. The system was defaulting to hidden organizers. Someone didn't want her to know who scheduled it. She marched back into her own office, opened a news tab out of habit, needed distraction, and there it was. Front page. MarketWire. Flag raised over PacificTel contract. Signature verification in question. She froze. That contract was one of the big ones. A cornerstone deal. 6 months ago, she needed it approved fast. Dean was out of town, unreachable. She'd improvised. Used his old e-signature template. Adjusted a few internal notes. He'd never mentioned it. Probably didn't know. Until now. She scrolled. The article quoted sources close to the board, expressing concern about compliance breakdowns. No names. But one sentence hit harder than the rest. If internal signatory fraud is confirmed, senior leadership may face immediate audit proceedings. She dropped the mouse. There was a knock on her door. It was Oliver. He slipped in, closing the door gently behind him. Hey. She exhaled. Thank God. I need to get ahead of this. They're overreacting. It's protocol. Susan's acting like this is. He raised a hand. You forged a board-level contract, Clara. I signed it for Dean. It was his project. He was in Vietnam for God's sake. Yeah, and now you're about to blame him for it. She narrowed her eyes. You don't get it. This is how it works. If I fall, the firm takes a hit. They won't let it get that far. Oliver was silent. She tilted her head. What? He stepped back a little. This was your idea, remember? The showmanship. The gala. Giving me the award. Oh, don't act like you resisted that. You loved it. You basked in it. He nodded. Sure. Until you kissed me in front of 3 board members and humiliated your husband. Ex-husband. Not on paper. She clenched her jaw. Don't turn on me now. Oliver gave a sad little laugh. Clara, I didn't turn. You did. You turned this from politics into theater. He started walking out. She called after him. Where are you going? He looked back. I'm leaving before the ship sinks. The door clicked shut. She stood in the center of her office, surrounded by glass and silence. Even the city outside felt muted, like the windows had thickened just to keep her screams in. For the first time in her career, hell, in her life, Clara felt it. Not just tension. Vacuum. No allies. No fallback. No rehearsed statement to explain this away. The first door had closed, and she realized, too late, it wouldn't be the last. The call came just after breakfast. Dean had just stepped outside the cabin, mug in hand, watching steam curl into the morning air. A lake spread out before him, flat as slate. Somewhere across the water, a loon called. It was the kind of silence most people found unsettling. Dean had grown to like it. His phone buzzed. Private line. He let it ring twice before answering. Dean Whitaker? The voice was crisp, controlled. A man who wasn't used to begging. Yes. This is Malcolm Cray, chair of the board. Dean said nothing. Just listened. We'd like to request your return. Temporarily. Strictly to oversee transition. Nothing more. Dean raised his mug. Took a slow sip. You already have a transition plan, he said. There was a pause. It was based on Clara's timeline, Malcolm admitted. Then I suggest you revise it. Dean, he said, softer now. This is a critical moment for us. Your institutional knowledge, your discretion, is invaluable. We're asking for your help. Dean exhaled. Not angry. Not smug. Just tired. I gave everything I had, he said. My name. My time. My credibility. She just handed it to a child. And now she wants me to rebuild the house she burned down. She's been placed on leave, Malcolm said quickly. Not my concern. We can make it worth your time. Dean chuckled. I'm sure you can. So you'll consider it. Dean stepped inside the cabin. Set the mug down. Picked up a manila envelope he'd been meaning to post. The label read, Awards Committee, Confidential. I'll send someone else in. I'm out. He ended the call. No anger. No victory lap. Just closure. That afternoon, a courier van pulled into the gravel lot. Dean stepped out to meet it. The man handed him a flat box, about the size of a chessboard. No return address. Inside, a handwritten letter on thick ivory stock. Susan's script was unmistakable. Bold, angular strokes. Decisive. Dean, thank you. For not shouting. For letting the silence speak louder. Some of us heard it. S. No preamble. No request. Just acknowledgement. He folded the letter once. Slid it into the fireplace without ceremony. Watched it curl black. Then picked up his phone. Not to call Clara. Not to call Malcolm. But the awards committee. He waded through the automated menu. Pressed 0. Finally, a woman answered. Executive nominations desk. This is Dean Whitaker, he said. I'm calling regarding the 2025 Visionary Award. I believe there's been an error. Sir, the recipient was misattributed. Another pause. Then, would you like to file a formal complaint? No, he said. I'm simply withdrawing my support. Retroactively. The nomination did not have my endorsement. I see. May I ask for a reason? He didn't hesitate. Conflict of interest. Misrepresentation. Improper attribution of collaborative work. Silence. Then, understood. We'll make a note. Thank you for your time. He hung up. Outside, the lake was still again. He didn't smile. Didn't gloat. But a small knot behind his ribs. The one that had been tightening for years. Ever since Clara's first sidestep. First half-truth. First public credit for a win she didn't fully earn. Loosened. Back in the city, Clara was pacing. 3 different board members hadn't replied to her emails. Her assistant had been reassigned. Oliver wasn't answering. And now the award, the very thing she'd hijacked to crown her rise, was suddenly in limbo. No official statement yet. But the silence? It was growing. And Clara, for once, couldn't fill it. The press release dropped without warning. No banner. No press conference. Just a quiet update on the committee's official site, buried beneath a schedule change for next month's finance forum. Due to procedural inconsistencies, the 2025 Visionary Award is hereby revoked. No replacement recipient will be named at this time. That was it. Sterile. Unemotional. Like it was a calendar correction instead of a career guillotine. But insiders? They knew. The statement spread through industry Slack channels like wildfire. Subtle edits were made to LinkedIn posts. PR managers whispered into phones. Clara's speaking engagements were suddenly in review. A podcast appearance was rescheduled. A Forbes profile already in layout was shelved indefinitely. She saw the release as she was standing in front of the mirror in her office bathroom, halfway through fixing her makeup for a scheduled interview that would now never happen. The headline flashed as a push notification on her phone. She clicked it twice, thinking it had to be fake. Spam. Or a leak from one of Dean's bitter friends. But it wasn't. It was official. She stared at the mirror for a moment. The red of her lipstick suddenly looked like war paint. She stormed out of the bathroom and into her office. Tanya, she yelled. Her assistant stepped in, reluctantly. Yes. Why didn't anyone tell me this was happening? Tanya hesitated. There was a board-only call this morning. You weren't on it. And no one thought to. They said you were being updated separately, she replied carefully. By Susan. Clara grabbed her phone. Dialed. Voicemail. She didn't even leave a message. She dialed again. Then again. Nothing. She tried Dean. Blocked. Of course. That's when the board's private comms app started lighting up. Clara still had access. Barely. The feed was exploding. Screenshots of the retraction. Passive-aggressive emoji reactions. Someone had posted a gif of a trophy melting in a fire. Another tagged Oliver. Guess you'll have to give the award back. Oliver didn't respond. She noticed his name vanish from the participant list a few minutes later. Someone had removed him. She scrolled faster, fingers twitching. Her hands felt disconnected from her body. This isn't happening. Then, her phone rang. A number she didn't recognize, but the area code made her stomach drop. The one she'd ignored at the gala. She picked up. Hello. There was a pause. Then Susan's voice. Ragged. Like it had aged a decade since their last real conversation. The board just called, she said. Your nomination? It's gone. Clara couldn't breathe. What? She whispered. They're calling it procedural, but it's more than that. They're spooked. You humiliated him in front of 3 investor families. Clara, do you understand that? One of them was about to offer him a fellowship. Now they're furious. Clara stumbled backward into her chair. He didn't even do anything, she said quietly. He walked away. He didn't fight. He just left. Susan's voice cracked. Exactly. He let the silence speak. There was a long pause. Neither spoke. Then Clara asked, in a tone that almost sounded like pleading. Can you fix it? Susan exhaled, long and slow. I warned you. I told you to stop treating your career like theater. But you didn't listen. You supported me. Clara snapped. I protected you, Susan corrected. That's not the same thing. Another beat of silence. Then, colder, you're on your own now. Click. The call ended. Clara sat in her chair, phone still to her ear, long after the line had gone dead. Outside, the city moved on without her. Somewhere, a neon billboard flashed an ad for the awards gala replay. The image hadn't been updated yet. Clara was still on it, smiling, holding a microphone. But the award? It was already gone. It happened fast, but not loud. Clara had always assumed that if she ever fell, it would be in flames, in headlines, in lawsuits and denials. But that wasn't how it went. She didn't even get a scandal. She got edited. Her badge stopped working first. Not just the executive elevator this time. Everything. Front entrance. Parking. Internal portal. She called IT. They said it was probably just a permissions reset. The next morning, HR asked her to work remotely while some internal matters are reviewed. The email used careful words. No accusations. Just space. That kind of space you give someone when you've already emptied their desk, but haven't told them yet. Oliver didn't return her messages. When she finally got him on the phone, he sounded strange. Careful. They reassigned me to Asia Pac, he said flatly. Effective immediately. Clara blinked. That's a demotion. He didn't argue. Just said, they said it's transitional. Did you push back? He hesitated. Clara, they found the invoice. The stipend. The one you buried. She felt her stomach sink. They're digging, he added. And I don't think they're going to stop. She tried calling Susan again. No answer. No one answered. Even Tanya, her assistant, was suddenly on PTO. By Thursday, her inbox was different. Invitations started disappearing. No follow-ups on her guest spot for the strategy podcast. No response from the conference in Munich, where she was meant to keynote. She checked her speaker profile. It was gone. So was her TEDx video. Unlisted. Then deleted. She called the organizer. He stammered through a vague explanation about ongoing review and changing brand standards. And then the worst blow. The nonprofit board she'd chaired for 7 years quietly removed her photo from their website. No statement. No farewell post. Just gone. All the places that once used her name like currency were suddenly allergic to it. The whispers followed. Former mints she'd fast-tracked were now using phrases like, I always thought something felt off. Journalists reached out, not for quotes, but for clarifications on your past role in the Jakarta project. One even asked whether she had any regrets about the gala incident. She didn't respond. Because how do you explain that the worst thing wasn't the collapse? It was that no one tried to stop it. And Dean? He didn't gloat. Didn't return fire. Didn't grant interviews or leak anything. He just vanished into a quiet little office on the edge of town, working 3 days a week with a veterans reintegration nonprofit. Small team. Local impact. No press releases. No cameras. When someone asked if he was that Dean Whitaker, he just smiled and said, used to be. His name didn't trend. But something else did. Screenshots of the award withdrawal. Speculation threads about the gala incident. A clip from the moment Clara handed the plaque to Oliver, freeze-framed, zoomed in on Dean's face as he turned to walk away. Silent. Poised. Someone captioned it. That's what power actually looks like. It went viral. The comments section wasn't cruel. Just precise. He warned her. She laughed. Now she's quiet. Lesson: don't mistake grace for weakness. Clara stayed offline after that. Tried to consult. No takers. Tried to pitch a memoir. No publishers replied. Tried to host a private dinner for old allies. No RSVPs. Even her calendar looked empty. Not just in the future, the past. All the things she had built were being unwritten in real time. Removed from BIOS. From websites. From memory. And through it all, Dean never said a word. He didn't need to. Everyone else did it for him. The envelope arrived 2 days before the gala. Cream-colored, sealed in red wax. Old-fashioned, deliberate. Addressed by hand to the event's host, an aging philanthropist who'd once called Dean a quiet architect of modern leadership. The man raised an eyebrow when he received it. From Whitaker, he murmured, breaking the seal carefully. Inside, no RSVP. No note explaining Dean's absence. Just a photo. Black and white. Printed on matte archival stock. It showed a much younger Dean, standing next to Clara on the rooftop of their first office building. He wore a navy blazer, his hair still full, tie slightly crooked. Clara stood beside him, laughing at something just out of frame. One hand rested lightly on his shoulder. She looked fearless, sharp, human. On the back, in Dean's precise cursive, were 12 words. I built her up. She tore herself down. No signature. just a small line beneath it. P.S. I warned her. Don't humiliate me at this gala. The host folded the photo slowly. He recognized the moment. He'd been there that day, back when Clara still asked Dean for permission before speaking on behalf of the firm. Back when she wore respect like perfume, subtle but unmistakable. Now, 6 months after the scandal, her name had become an unspoken weight in every boardroom. Clients still whispered about the gala incident, though none could quite explain what had happened, only that it had ended her. The night of the new gala arrived. The room looked different, a little older, a little more cautious. Oliver wasn't there. He'd taken a sabbatical in Singapore. Clara hadn't been seen publicly in months. Rumor was she was consulting under a pseudonym, using a burner phone and a co-working space in Atlanta. Dean's name was printed on the program, slotted to present the visionary award he was once set to receive. His title beneath it, Advisor Emeritus. But he never walked on stage. Instead, the MC stepped up to the mic just before the final presentation. She held the photo in her hand, cleared her throat. I was asked to read something, she said, scanning the crowd. It comes from someone who chose not to attend tonight. She turned the photo. I built her up. She tore herself down. There was a beat. People glanced around, unsure if it was appropriate to clap. Then the MC added the final line, her voice firmer now. I warned her. Don't humiliate me at this gala. The room fell dead quiet. No one laughed. No one clapped. Just silence, thick and knowing. And from a table near the back, a figure stood. Clara. She hadn't been on the guest list. Someone must have let her in under a +1. She wore a simple black dress, no jewelry, no makeup, her hair pulled back like she couldn't decide whether she was attending or sneaking in. When the words were read, she didn't flinch, but her face drained of color. And then, quietly, deliberately, she turned and walked out. Alone. No Oliver. No cameras. No speech to reclaim the room. Just a woman leaving a stage that no longer belonged to her. The curtain didn't fall, because there was no need. The show was already over.